All right, strap in, everyone. We're going deep on the mechanics of Dragon Ball Sparking Zero.
And we've got a great source to guide us.
Right. We're talking about that super in-depth YouTube review by Lotus Sakura. He's like the fighting game expert.
Yeah, his breakdown is really interesting. He clearly loves Sparking Zero, but he's not afraid to call out its flaws.
Exactly, which makes him perfect for our deep dive.
Because we're not just praising the game.
Nope. We're going to dissect what works, what needs work, so you can get the most out of your gameplay.
It's all about understanding the mechanics.
Okay, so one thing that jumped out at me right away, Lotus Sakura actually calls Sparking Zero a 12 out of 10.
Whoa.
Compared to other recent anime games. That's high praise.
It is high praise, but then he goes on to list all these problems.
Right, it's like, wait, is this a love-hate relationship?
Well, I think that comparison to other games actually says a lot about the state of anime fighting games in general,
Interesting. So maybe he's grading on a curve. But let's focus on what he actually likes about the mechanics.
Sure.
One thing he praises is the ability to train while you're matchmaking.
Oh, yeah. That's brilliant.
Right. I wish more games would do that. Imagine all that wasted time just sitting in menus.
You're just like twiddling your thumbs.
Exactly. But in Sparking Zero, you could be practicing combos, warming up.
Yeah, it really keeps you engaged.
Okay. But now for the bad news. Xbox players are getting kind of screwed.
Yeah, Lotus Sakura really goes into it.
Connection errors, crashes, it seems way worse than on PlayStation.
Unfortunately, that's not unusual with Japanese game development. PlayStation's just bigger over there, so it often gets prioritized.
Yeah, but still, gotta be frustrating for Xbox players, hoping they fix that soon.
Definitely.
Now, for the fun part, at least to talk about, the glitches.
Oh, there are some good ones.
Lotus Sakura lists some hilarious ones, like getting stuck above the ceiling
That's classic.
and characters sliding forever after knockdowns. He even mentions a potential invincibility glitch with Kefla.
Ooh, that could be game-breaking.
Right. Some glitches are funny, but others could really mess with competitive play. What have you encountered, glitch-wise?
Oh, I've got some stories, but
Yeah.
we'll save those for later.
Okay, deal. Now let's talk about this mechanic that Lotus Sakura seems to have a love-hate relationship with, the lock-on system.
Yes, the infamous lock-on.
He complains it's either totally useless or way too sensitive. Have you experienced it?
Oh, absolutely. See, the lock-on is trying to balance two things.
Okay.
You've got the classic fighting game need for precision, like targeting your attacks.
Right.
But then you've got the Dragon Ball thing, that fast cinematic action where you're flying all over the place.
So the lock-on is stuck in the middle trying to do both.
Yeah, and it doesn't always succeed.
And get this, Lotus Sakura actually suggests maybe Sparking Zero would be better without a lock-on atoll.
Whoa, radical.
Right. We'll have to dig into that idea later. But for now, let's move on to something a little less controversial. Quality of life improvements. These are like the small things that make a big difference.
Absolutely. Lotus Sakura lists a bunch of them. Bigger lobbies would be nice.
More control over settings too, right?
Exactly. And just making the online experience smoother overall.
Like, stuff that doesn't change the core gameplay, but just makes it more enjoyable. He talked about forgetting to press X to spectate and missing out on epic battles.
Oh, I've done that. It's so annoying.
I know, right?
Mm.
And the matchmaking ping is so loud.
It's like jump scare every time.
Okay, let's zoom in on one specific area where Lotus Sakura has some strong opinions. DP battle mode.
Right. He really wants to see custom teams in that mode.
Yeah, like how Dragon Ball FighterZ does it. Why is that so important to him?
Well, because it adds this whole strategic layer to DP battle.
Okay, I'm listening.
Imagine if you could preset your teams before a match instead of choosing on the fly. You could actually plan synergies and counter picks.
Oh, I see. So it's not just about saving time, it's about changing how you approach DP battle entirely.
Exactly. It would add so much depth to the mode.
Okay, let's rapid fire through some smaller complaints that Lotus Sakura brings up. These might not seem huge, but they add up.
Yeah, it's like death by 1,000 paper cuts.
Exactly. So, ready.
Hit me.
No alternate colors for mirror matches.
Ugh, annoying.
Confusing shot menus.
So true.
A weird blurring glitch he mentions.
I haven't encountered that one.
And limited music options. None of these are deal breakers alone, but they're just kind of there bugging you.
It's the little things.
Okay, brace yourselves, because we're about to get to what seems like Lotus Sakura's biggest frustration. Input delay.
Oh, yeah. He does not hold back on that one.
He talks about how it messes up everything from supers to character swaps. And as someone who plays a lot of fighting games, I feel him.
Even a tiny delay can throw off your whole game.
It's like trying to drive a car where the steering is a little bit loose, you know?
Exactly. And in a game as fast-paced as Sparking Zero, it's brutal.
It makes the game feel unfair, unresponsive.
And it's especially bad when you're trying to do those complex combos.
So even though Lotus Sakura is critical, it's clear he cares about Sparking Zero. He wants it to succeed.
Oh, definitely. It's constructive criticism, you know? He's highlighting these issues because he sees the potential.
And here's some good news. The developers are apparently aware of a lot of these problems and working on fixes.
That's great to hear. Gives me hope for the future of the game.
Me too.
Yeah.
But we've only just scratched the surface of Sparking Zero's mechanics.
There's so much more to explore.
Exactly. So stay tuned for part 2, where we'll dive even deeper into the glitches, the lock-on debate, and everything else that makes this game tick.
It's gonna be a wild ride. Back again for more Dragon Ball Sparking Zero deep dive action.
Round 2. We're still digging into the mechanics of this game.
Using Lotus Sakura's review as our guide, he gave us a lot to think about.
Oh yeah, tons of stuff. But that whole invincibility glitch with Kefla keeps coming back to me.
I know, right? Imagine that in a tournament.
Chaos. It makes you wonder how many other glitches are hidden in the game.
Oh, there are bound to be more. That's part of what makes Sparking Zero so unpredictable.
But it also raises questions about game balance.
For sure. If one character can just become invincible, even if it's a glitch, it throws off the whole competitive scene.
It makes you think twice about taking those online matches too seriously.
Maybe. Speaking of things that can throw off your game, let's circle back to that lock-on system.
Ah, yes, the lock-on. Lotus Sakura had some strong opinions about that.
He did. And I get where he's coming from. I think his frustration comes from the fact that the lock-on system is kind of stuck between two worlds.
Okay, explain that.
So, on the one hand, it's trying to be a traditional fighting game mechanic. You know, you need precise targeting for combos and all that.
Right, makes sense.
But on the other hand, it's also trying to capture that, like, over-the-top high-speed action that Dragon Ball is known for.
Yeah, all the flying around, teleporting crazy beams.
Exactly. And those two things don't always play nicely together.
So the lock-on system is kind of having an identity crisis.
Kinda. Sometimes it feels too sticky. Sometimes it doesn't lock on when you need it to. It can be really inconsistent.
Lotus Sakura also had some good ideas for quality of life improvements that could make the game smoother.
Oh, yeah. Those are important. Things like bigger lobbies, more control over settings.
And making the online experience less clunky. It's all about making the game more enjoyable to play.
Exactly. It's those little annoyances that can really add up over time.
You know, like that matchmaking ping that's so loud it makes you jump every time.
I hate that. Or how about those long, unskippable intros? We've seen them a million times.
So true. Those small things can really impact your enjoyment of the game, even if the core gameplay is solid.
Absolutely. It's like death by 1,000 paper cuts, you know?
Yeah.
Individually, they're not a big deal, but they wear you down.
Okay, let's talk about one specific area where Lotus Sakura's suggestions really resonated with me. DP battle mode.
Right. He was all about those preset custom teams.
Like the way Dragon Ball Fighter Z handles it. I think that's such a smart idea.
It would change the whole strategy of DP battle.
Imagine building teams beforehand, you know, planning out synergies, counter picks.
You would add so much depth to the mode.
Instead of just choosing characters on the fly, you'd have actual team compositions.
It would be way more competitive.
And more fun, I think. Okay, we've talked glitches, lock-on, quality of life.
A lot of ground covered.
But there's one big issue we haven't tackled yet. Input delay. Lotus Sakura did not hold back on that one.
He did not. And for good reason. It's a killer in fighting games.
It can make the game feel so unresponsive and unfair.
Especially in a game like Sparking Zero, where timing is everything.
You're trying to execute these precise combos, and the game's just lagging behind you.
It's incredibly frustrating. It can make you feel like you're fighting the game itself, not your opponent.
So what can you do about it? Well, first, make sure it's not on your end. Check your internet connection. Make sure you're not using Wi-Fi if you can help it.
Good advice.
But if it ites the game, well, not much you can do except hope the developers fix it.
The good news is they are aware of the issue.
Right. They're working on it. But in the meantime, you got to focus on what you can control.
Exactly. Practice your execution, learn the matchups, master your characters.
And try to anticipate the input delay. Adjust your timing accordingly.
It's like playing on an old arcade machine that's a bit laggy, you know?
Yeah, you got to adjust to the quirks.
Exactly. So, to wrap up this part of our deep dive, we've covered a lot of ground. Glitches, lock-on woes, quality of life, and the dreaded input delay.
But don't worry, we're not done yet. In part 3, we're going to take all this knowledge and turn it into actionable advice.
We're going to show you how to use this understanding of Sparking Zero's mechanics to actually improve your gameplay.
Welcome back to our Dragon Ball Sparking Zero Deep Dive Grand Finale.
We've torn apart the mechanics, analyzed the good and the bad.
All thanks to Lotus Asira's awesome review. Gotta give him credit.
But now it's time to put it all together.
Right. How do we actually use this knowledge to become better Sparking Zero players?
That's the million-dollar question. It's one thing to know about glitches.
Yeah, or debate the lock-on system until we're blue in the face.
But how do we translate all that into actual skill?
Okay, so practical tips time. Where do we even start?
Well, let's revisit that lock-on system, shall we?
The lock-on, source of so much joy and frustration.
It's a weird one, right? Trying to be both precise and chaotic.
Yeah, like pick a lane, lock on, but before we go full Lotus of Soccer and just ditch it all together.
Maybe there's a way to work with its quirks.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How do we do that?
First, we got to understand its limitations. When does it work? When does it go haywire? Pay attention to those moments.
So it's like knowing your enemy.
Exactly. Once you know how the lock-on behaves, you can adapt your playstyle.
So instead of relying on it blindly, we got to use it strategically.
Right, like if you're going for a super precise combo.
Maybe turn the lock on OFF for a bit so you have more control.
Exactly. But if you're chasing down an opponent who's running away,
The lock on can be useful to keep them in sight.
it's all about adapting, being flexible.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about those custom DP battle teams that Lotus of Soccer was so hyped about?
Oh, that's a game changer for sure.
Right. Imagine building teams with specific strategies in mind,
Like characters that are perfect for rushing down your opponent.
or those that excel at zoning them out.
You could even create teams designed to counter specific characters.
Whoa, that's taking it to a whole other level.
It would make DP battle way more strategic, way more competitive.
And probably way more fun, too. All right, so we've talked about working with the lock-on.
And thinking strategically about our DP battle teams,
But what about those smaller quality of life things? You know, the little annoyances.
those are important too. Remember, death by 1,000 paper cuts.
Oh yeah, those tiny things can add up and ruin your experience.
Exactly. If you're constantly getting frustrated by menus or whatever.
It takes away from the fun of the game itself.
So what can we do? Well, for starters, let the developers know.
Right. Give them feedback. Tell them what's bugging you.
And in the meantime, there are workarounds.
Like what?
Well, if you keep forgetting to press X to spectate,
Oh yeah, I've done that so many times.
make a little mental checklist before each match.
Okay, that's actually a good
Couldn't have said it better myself. Okay, time to address the big one.
input delay. The bane of every fighting game player's existence.
It's a tough one because sometimes it's not even your fault.
Right, you do everything right, good internet, wired connection.
And the game is still lagging behind you.
Super frustrating. So what do we do?
Well, if it's on the game's end, honestly, not much you can do but wait for a patch.
Fingers crossed the developers fix it soon.
They're working on it, which is good, but in the meantime, focus on what you can control.
Okay, like what?
Practice, practice, practice. Get those combos down in muscle memory.
Master your main characters, learn their ins and outs.
And most importantly, try to anticipate the input delay.
So if you know there's going to be a lag, adjust your timing.
Exactly. It's like playing a rhythm game where the beat is slightly off.
Haha, I get it. You got to adjust to the rhythm.
And that brings us to the end of our Dragon Ball Sparking Zero deep dive. We covered a lot.
Glitches, the lock-on saga, quality of life tweaks, even the dreaded input delay.
But hopefully you've walked away with a better understanding of how this game works.
And most importantly, how to use that knowledge to become a better player.
Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about.
Right. So go out there, experiment, practice, and most importantly, have fun.
That's the true spirit of Sparking Zero, and any game, really.
Until next time, keep on sparking.